So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome in this breakout session of the Connected Fleets Conference 2021. You have chosen the session in which our automotive and technology journalist, Quartier, is going to picture some insights based on some trends that he is seeing related to electrification and connectivity. The purpose is that you can ask your questions. So we have a deep dive breakout of 20 minutes in total. Dieter is going first to give his presentation, but please use the chat function in the tool. Ask your question, and at the end, I will moderate some questions that you ask, that you have for Dieter, and so that we can have an engaging discussion. If by the end you would like also to share your audio and screen, we can even allow you to come into the tool so that we can have the live, let's say, the live between brackets discussion between you and our journalist, Dieter Quartier. Dieter, welcome. I hope that you are doing fine. We have already your presentation on the screen, so that's good. So if you are ready, we are ready, and you can start your presentation.
All right. Thank you very much, Stephen. And indeed, nice to meet you all here in this virtual Connected Fleet Conference 2021. And as Stephen said, I will be sharing a few market trends and new developments that, I have been seeing in these past few months. There has been quite a few changes and evolutions, probably accelerated by certain events of the past year. So the first thing that I'm seeing, I'm just trying to, the first thing that I'm seeing is that there is a shift in the mix between PHEV and BEV. The graph that you are seeing here is taken from a report by Transport and Environment based on figures provided by J2 Dynamics, and it paints a picture of the situation about a year ago, so the first half of 2020. And as you can see, it's an overview of all OEMs that are present on the European market. And the blue bars indicate the proportion of PHEV that they have been selling in the first half of 2020. The light blue bar indicates the proportion of battery electric vehicles. What you can immediately see from these figures is that there's one brand in particular that's really been pushing for plug-in hybrid, and that's Volvo. So about 1 in 4 Volvos sold last year were plug-in hybrids. The number of battery electric vehicles was 0 because Volvo had not launched the electric XC40 yet. You also see here that FCA and Tesla are grouped in one and the same bar. That's because, of course, FCA pooled their vehicles with Tesla to comply with EU CO2 emission targets. What we always also see, you see BMW that has about 2/3 of its sales plug-in hybrid and 1/3 in battery electric. Kia has a good mix, 50-50, PHEV, BEV. Hyundai has more focus on BEV. And that's basically the major trends that you see, or the major differences. Looking at the white line, the line that spikes in the Volkswagen area, so to speak. Well, that's the absolute numbers that the OEMs have been selling in 2020. And so what does this show? Well, that Volkswagen is the absolute number one EV provider, or was the absolute number one EV provider back in 2020. This gives a clear indication of where the brands are, or where they were last year, but I'm quite sure that this will shift this year and the coming years, because PHEV was, let's say, the way to go to reach CO2 emission targets, the CAFE targets. But well, to get to the next step in terms of emission targets, the focus really has to be on BEV. So we will see an explosion of BEV models, and the graph that we see here will probably be entirely different this year. Talking about OEM announcements about electrification. Well, I've found a few. Of course, there are a few more than this, but these are the most striking ones, let's say. And I've well put them on a line from progressive over neutral to conservative, and that might perhaps surprise you that this is the way I've put them in this order. Why did I place Jaguar on top? Well, it's actually the only brand that has announced that it will become all electric from 2025 globally, not only in Europe. There's an important difference to be made because some brands, they communicate different targets depending on whether they're talking about global level or European level. So Jaguar, I would say, is one of the most progressive brands in terms of electrification. Ford as well, they will start selling only PHEV and BEV from 2024. And from 2030, their focus will be entirely on battery electric, but that's only for Europe. So they're not talking about their home market, America. Volvo Cars aims at 50% battery electric from 2025. So the other half will be PHEV and mild hybrid. Diesel will, of course, be terminated. That has been announced quite a few years ago. And from 2030, Volvo will be an entirely electric brand globally. Then we see, let's say, the most fleet-oriented brands in Europe, especially in terms of benefit cars. Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz, BMW Group. What have they been saying? Well, VW Group aims at 1.5 million battery electric sales per year from 2025, but that's globally. So in Europe, well, the proportion of BEV sales will probably be higher in Europe than in North America. And perhaps even in Asia, depending on market circumstances and incentivization. What does that mean? Well, 1.5, you have to relate that to a total number of about 9 to 10 million vehicles sold. So that's 1 in 8, 1 in 7, 1 in 8 vehicles. So that's why I put it rather down the line towards a more conservative perspective on electrification, because, well, it means that there will still be a lot of non-electrified vehicles that Volkswagen will be selling. Probably a lot of mild hybrids, which are, so to speak, not really hybrids. They're merely, let's say, evolved versions of ICE vehicles. Mercedes-Benz, they're targeting more than 50% xEV share by 2030 globally. xEV is the total of battery electric and plug-in hybrid electric. And BMW Group, even though it is, let's say, a pioneer in terms of electrification, they just launched the iX yesterday, and they will be launching the i4 all-electric model in the coming weeks. So they are really pushing forward with their electric models, but still they will not go as far as to say we will only build electric vehicles or plug-in hybrids. No, the strategy of BMW is clear. They will be offering diesel vehicles and petrol vehicles as long as their customers demand them. So that's why even though BMW is really pushing in its communication about being a pioneer, well, I would rather put them in a more conservative area in terms of that, because, well, a quarter of their vehicles will be xEV in 2021, a third by 2025, and half by 2030 also globally. So they really align with Mercedes-Benz in that respect. So looking at the number of EV models back in 2019 and what the number of EV models will be in 4 years' time from now, well, we've been we come from just 100 models 2 years ago, and we will have more than 300 models in 2025. And you'll see here indeed that some brands are really putting the pedal to the metal, so to speak, in terms of electrification. You see that BMW there is really one of the key players. So is Daimler, and PSA Ford will also be really pushing forward together with the Volkswagen Group. But again, so the number of EVs, this is the combination of BEV and PHEV. The shift will clearly go towards BEV, and PHEV is, well, there will be more models of PHEV coming, but let's say the evolution in BEV will be a lot stronger than in the PHEV market. Looking at the major trends, well, there's a lot of things to be said, but I try to group them in 3 sub-teams. Let's say there's the battery supply chain and sourcing aspect. There's also, of course, the technology aspect. And then finally, there's some interesting thoughts on the ecosystem. Looking at the battery supply chain, first element there is that the price of the battery cells will drop faster than initially expected. Some believe that the price will drop below 100 euro per kilowatt hour by mid-decade. And that, of course, is a key enabler to democratize electric driving. It will open up the roads for more affordable electric vehicles in the compact segment, in the small segment. So that's really important that these prices keep on coming down. Of course, there's more than battery cells than to the total price of a vehicle, but it's an important enabler. What else is there to be said? Well, OEMs, they are securing battery supply deals, and that's also, of course, a very important aspect. You can announce that you have 50 electric models by 2025. If you don't have the battery cells to build them, then you have an issue. So what the brands have been doing in these past few years is actually securing battery supply deals from, well, predominantly the Asian providers such as CATL, Samsung, Panasonic, etc. That's one aspect. So they are making sure that they have enough supply. Another aspect is, of course, that they are investing themselves in joint ventures to develop, let's say, Tesla-like gigafactories. BMI, so Benchmark Mineral Intelligence, they expect that there will be about 16 gigafactories for batteries by 2030 in Europe. Earlier this week, Volkswagen announced that they would have 6 gigafactories in Europe by 2030, and 2 of them would be a joint venture, a joint project with Northvolt, the Swedish company, and the other ones will probably be with own funding. Daimler is, of course, also investing in its own production facilities. Other brands, well, they are looking at different ways to source battery cells, but it is a trend. So OEMs, they are starting to think about building their own gigafactories to make sure they have enough battery supply. Another thing there is that OEMs are really looking to sustainability, to make sure that the materials they source, that they are ethically sourced and sustainably sourced. That's also a very important aspect, and that's something that the OEMs have been communicating about quite a lot. Looking at the technological aspect, whereas until now most electric vehicles were derived from existing models, look at the e-Golf, well, there are now more and more models being launched onto the market that are derived or that based on a dedicated, modular and scalable BEV platform. Look at Volkswagen ID.3. There's, for instance, also the announcement of PSA that they are launching or preparing rather a specific electric platform. So we really see that the brands have been preparing specific BEV platforms that, of course, offer a lot of advantages in terms of efficiency. It is, of course, a much better idea to develop a battery electric vehicle on its bespoke platform rather than start from a platform that has not really been specifically developed for battery electric. And they're also sharing with one another. Look at Volkswagen and Ford, for instance. So Ford will be developing its own compact model based on the Volkswagen ID.3 model. They will be building that in Cologne. There's also a switch from 400 volt to 800 volt. That's an important technological evolution because it allows for a much faster charging. That's something I will come back to in the next slide. And as I said, well, also sustainability is very important in terms of technology. So a lot of a lot of OEMs are now focusing on recycling and focusing on the reduction of need for critical raw materials.
Dieter,
finally, we have...
You need to hurry up a little bit to speed up, okay?
Okay.
Because you only have a few minutes left. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Then ecosystem, we have an ever faster charging on the charge point side, and then we have ever more charging points, such as Ionity fast chargers. And last but not least, connectivity makes charging points not only visible from the vehicle or from a smartphone app, it makes them also accessible, and you can even pay for charging from right from the vehicle. Looking at the product evolution, well, in the high end, you see here that the BMW iX, for instance, offers about 100 kilowatt hour of battery, which suffices for 600 kilometers of electric range. DC fast charging can be done at 200 to 250 kilowatts, so reducing the charging time to less than 30 minutes. Model S Plaid is also a very interesting evolution in terms of technology, and the final car you see here is the Mercedes EQS, or at least the prototype that heralds the final EQS. So here again, you see that the technology is really getting up to speed and making 600 kilometers of range, even 700 kilometers possible. At the low end, there's a lot of room. The only car manufacturer today that is offering something below 14,000 euros is Dacia, the Dacia Spring, 230 kilometer range. But then, of course, fast charging can only be done at 30 kilowatts. Meaning that, of course, you will have to wait a bit longer. So that's, of course, the disadvantage. You get what you pay for. In the Middlefield, we have some interesting evolutions. That, of course, here the Ioniq 5 from Hyundai and Kia EV6, which are basically on the same platform. What is important here to remember is that they can DC fast charge at 350 kilowatts, thanks to their 800 volt technology. And that, of course, means that you can charge in just 18 minutes at a DC fast charger from 10 to 80%. So that's interesting to see. In terms of connected services, we see here, of course, the connected navigation. That's a really important element to know about. Connected navigation means that the vehicle can take into account the road, the topography, speed limits, etc. Also, vehicles in front of you to, let's say, to proactively adapt the powertrain and to regenerate as much as possible. So connected navigation really is a huge benefit in terms of efficiency. Plug and charge, that's something that Porsche is developing. So rather than having to tag or to badge your card at a charging point, you can just plug your car with a cable and the process will start automatically. You also get an automatic bill, etc. Pre-book charging is another one. So that's something that BMW is considering. So rather than taking your chances and arriving at the station to see if it's available or not, you could pre-book a charging point station from your car. And last but not least, introduction of 5G. There's automated parking and even automated charging that would be made possible thanks to the introduction of 5G technology, something that the BMW iX, for instance, has been prepared for. Then a final overview of LCV, because LCV is, of course, following in the footsteps of cars. Here you see an overview of the different OEMs, the different vehicle segments. What I want to show you here is that the number of vehicles is still rather limited, and that there's quite a number of gaps left. But these gaps will be filled up in the coming months, in the coming years. And what, of course, is really interesting to see here is that they offer different battery pack sizes. In terms of ELCV, that's important because, of course, the bigger the battery, the heavier the car, the smaller the payload. So if you put in a big battery, that means that you get more range, but of course you compromise the amount of load in the cargo area. But there's a lot of interesting things happening here, and here again, connectivity can play a really important role into to increase charging, to increase efficiency, etc. So just a few key takeaways, Stephen, and then I'm at the end of my presentation. So first of all, choose the battery size that fits the bill. Most OEMs are now starting to offer different battery sizes in their models. Make sure that you pick the right one, because well, the bigger the battery, the more expensive the vehicle. And if you don't need the battery, then it's a waste of money, a waste of resources. Also compare charging specs to optimize user experience. Make sure that your vehicle can charge as fast as you need it to charge, and yeah, make sure that that you compare. Then finally, educate your drivers to make optimum use of their EV, not least regarding connectivity. So make sure that they are fully aware of the capabilities of their vehicle in terms of connected services to really increase efficiency and make charging a good user experience. And finally, widen your supplier horizon. Look further than your standard suppliers, because if you want to offer enough vehicles to your drivers, it's wise to look a bit further than your further suppliers, than your current suppliers. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you, Dieter. Thank you very
much.
much. Thank you for the insights. The first question comes from Kim Marquez. Dieter, today there is still quite a price gap between petrol diesel vehicles and battery electric vehicles. Do you see this gap closing in the upcoming years, let's say 5 to 10 years, when most OEMs move to pure battery electric vehicles and the manufacturing of those vehicles? Do you think that we can see, let's say, price parity and TCO parity?
Yes, that's something that most experts agree on, that the price parity will be reached by 2023, 24. So that's relatively soon. That has to do, of course, with the scaling up of the technology, the fact that battery cell pricing is coming down. Yeah, it's a combination of larger scale and let's say cheaper materials to source. So definitely 2024 is the year that most experts agree on, that we will reach parity between cost parity between the battery electric and ICE. You mustn't forget, of course, that ICE vehicles will also become more expensive to keep compliant with ever stringent emission targets. So
good. Yeah. Another question is related to charging. We hear a lot about the differences in charging, fast charging, for example, but fast charging comes also with a cost, with a price. How do you see that evolve?
Yeah. Well, here as well, I think the cost is probably coming down. It's also a matter of scaling up and gaining experience. So there's two sides of the story. There's, of course, the charge point side, and there's the vehicle side. If we move from 400 volt to 800 volt, that will already be a huge difference in terms of technology. And yeah, it's as I said, it's a matter of scaling up, and this will for sure happen in the next few years. So the price of DC charging, in terms of the charging point itself, will come down. Of course, if you're talking about the electricity you pay at the charging point, it is of course related to the cost of the charging point itself. But as competition increases, I'm sure that these prices will the price differences will probably level out, and it might be even thinkable that DC fast charging would become a bit less expensive than it is today.
Dieter, unfortunately, we need to close the session now. Thank you very much. You will come back later on in another breakout session. So if you have questions for Dieter, you can also ask them in the chat function. Dieter will be with us also this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to network. You can go to the networking area in the tool where you can meet at random with the other participants, or you can also visit the booths of our sponsors. We will be back with the next session on main stage, Data Insight, the recipe for cost efficiency, at 11:10 Central European Time. Enjoy the networking. Thank you. Bye-bye.